Welcome to Hello World, where we help you rediscover the good that is all around you. Doing good in this world often requires confronting evil. In today's episode, we visit with Scott and Sarah Lambie, who have been involved in many ministries that in particular serve children. And one of those ministries is what we're going to be visiting about today. That ministry is Rescue One More, which is a child advocacy organization specifically helping sexually abused children in Uganda. So welcome to Hello World. It's so good to have you both here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having us on.
So we're just glad that we can meet in person.
Yeah.
Austin is not exactly a stone's throw from Houston, but we used to live here.
Uh-huh.
And so we're glad to be back here and visit with you all.
Yeah, thanks for having us on.
Some in our audience may not have seen episode 5. So maybe share with the group a little bit about yourself and maybe some of the ministries you were involved in.
Okay. My name's Scott Lambie, and my wife is Sarah, and we have 6 children living back here in Dripping Springs, close by Austin now. But we started our family in Austin in 1998 and got involved in the tech world when we got here. Sarah was working in public relations, and I was in sales, tech sales, and we did that for a number of years. And then started to feel like something was missing, and we weren't believers at the time, but we started down this little spiritual journey trying to discover meaning, hope, and what our spirits were calling out for, because we just didn't understand it. And along the way ended up finding Jesus and getting involved in our local church, serving in our local church. And the way our calling has always played out is we've just really had a heart for children who live in poverty, who are vulnerable. And that path ended up leading us to Africa. In 2008, Sarah made me take a trip to Kenya. And
Made you, huh?
Well, I didn't want to go. She really wanted to go.
We were going to go together on a mission trip. And then I felt God urging me to pull out. I felt very strongly that God wanted me to pull out because he needed to do some work and show Scott something, and I would be a distraction. And so with great sadness, I agreed and did not go, and urged Scott to go regardless. He was not pleased with me at the time, but he did.
I didn't want to go. They had just gone through some post-election violence in Kenya. It was a bit scary, but we went over with the African Children's Choir and did an outreach in the slums. And God just showed me at the time, this is where you need to be.
Yeah.
And when I came back, felt like we needed to pick up the whole crew and move over there. And the African Children's Choir offered me a job in Uganda, and we had never been there before, but sight unseen moved our family to Uganda to serve with the African Children's Choir.
So prior to this, you had never been to Uganda or Africa. You'd never heard of African Children's Choir.
No, we had been involved with the African Children's Choir. That's who I went to Kenya with.
Okay, so you had, before that trip, you had worked with them or knew of them.
Yeah, we had seen concerts. Our church had hosted an African Children's Choir concert, and we hosted children in our house. And so we were pretty familiar with the organization. Sarah was doing a Bible study with one of the directors, and that's how we were really connected into it.
Got it.
So at that time, you guys are already married, met at church. Was it? No, you weren't met at church.
No, we met in high school.
Okay.
And we actually came into our marriage as non-believers.
Okay, so y'all became Christian together.
Yeah.
Down on our knees together in our living room and gave our lives to
Wow.
Christ. It was a journey that we started separately but merged together on.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, we both got baptized the same day.
When was that?
It was 2005.
2005.
I was 9 months pregnant with our
Wow.
now 18-year-old.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but you probably were called into ministry at different times. It sounds like maybe, Sarah, you were kind of tugged at it a little earlier, and that's why you were wanting to go on this trip, right?
That's true. That's true. I had a 3 years prior to us moving to Uganda, I had an experience where the Lord showed me that we would be doing ministry abroad, and I didn't know where, and He didn't give me very many details, but I knew we were on a journey there, and was being obedient in what He had told me to do to prepare for this.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And then you stepped aside for Scott to experience the same calling.
That's exactly what happened.
Brilliant. You saw the vision, you saw the light, and you felt tugged. Your heart was tugged when you went.
Yeah, I'd never seen poverty that extreme. We were in the slums in Nairobi, Kenya, and the kids had just experienced this violent uprising, and they saw people in their neighborhoods killing each other, and they were at the same time like the most joyful little kids, and appreciative and hospitable, and they were just enjoying what small thing that our team brought over there with games and a little, vacation Bible school. And it just seemed like one of the most needy, well, it was the most needy place I had ever been before. It was like, maybe we can do something here to help these kids.
So today, seeing your Facebook page, you have a rather large family. Can you introduce your family a little bit to us?
You want me to do that?
Go for it.
Okay, so I could tell you from oldest to youngest, we have Hope, who's 27. We adopted Hope while we were over in Uganda.
Okay.
And then we have Andrew, who's 25. He's a biological, and he's off on tour in Europe. He's a musician.
Yeah.
And then Vanessa is 23, and she is from Uganda. We adopted Vanessa there. We have Corey, who's our nephew. He's 20. He's in college. Noah's 18. He's at Dripping Springs High School. Football player. We have a big playoff game tomorrow in San Antonio. And then we have Mac, who's the youngest, and he's in 8th grade out there in Dripping Springs. He's also a little football player.
And adopted.
Yeah, and he's adopted as well. Wow. So that's our crew. There's 6, and it's crazy.
So you went to Africa with how many children? 3, and you came back with 6. Fantastic.
So we knew each other from Lake Hills Church, and I know, at least when I met you guys, I know you were very involved in the children's ministry as well, right?
Yeah.
I even had, when I preparing for episode 5, I saw a lot of pictures with you just jamming away in guitar in the children's ministry. And so what were some of your past children's ministry that you got involved in, or just ministry in general prior to the current one?
Well, that was really kind of the first one, was at Lake Hills.
Base camp.
And yeah, it was like one of the pastors asked if I would lead worship, like kind of with no audition or anything. I was just like, are you sure you wanted to do this? And learned along the way. But we were also taking trips down to the Panda Vida Children's Home in Mexico. And you guys went.
We went one time.
Larry did,
with Hannah.
That was our first entry into international missions.
We did that for about 3 years, and we probably went 4 or 5 times a year leading trips down there for the church.
Yeah. I still remember taking the van, just crossing the border. You went from a lot of city bright lights to darkness. Just dark. The road, no lights. And the road was unpaved. And you hear chicken and rooster croak in the morning. And we don't get that here.
No.
Right.
It's a natural alarm clock.
Yeah.
So that for us was really just an incredible time, because that was, we were going into this situation of extreme poverty, and we were seeing these children whose parents were incarcerated, and they didn't have a whole lot. Sometimes we'd show up and the refrigerators would be empty. There might not be toilet paper, but they always had a smile on their face. And that was the first time I realized, like, you can have nothing, no physical possessions, but if you have Jesus, you've got the joy of the Lord. I didn't know those things were inseparable until then.
Yeah. So I know I interviewed Scott for your past time at the African Children's Choir, and we titled that episode called "The Ripple Effect" because you said it's working there is like having this ripple effect of touching other people, and other ministry, especially in Africa, spun out of that. Yeah. And you currently are CEO and founders of another ministry called Rescue One More. Can you tell us more about that? I mean, we knew about it, but if you can tell our audience more about Rescue One More.
So, okay, Rescue One More is 2.5 years old, and it came out of our time with the African Children's Choir and our time in Uganda. During the lockdowns and COVID, our daughter Vanessa, who's 23 years old now, she said she wanted to start telling her story. She had been abused as a young girl, and that's how she came into our life in Uganda. And we knew her backstory and struggles she had gone through to get to us, and she wanted to share those so she could help other children. And we were pretty concerned about that because in Uganda they don't talk about abuse, and it's a pretty silenced story. So we had asked Vanessa to go and just tell her story to a couple of friends of ours and see if she could get her story across to just a few couples before sharing it with a broader group of people. And she went out and met with some of our friends, and they all came back and said, well, we need to do something. So we started dreaming up different solutions to help the children on the ground in Uganda. And a friend of ours ended up introducing us to the Children's Advocacy Centers of Texas. And the director of the CACs met with us and gave us their program. And that program is what we're implementing in Uganda now. So in a very short amount of time, Rescue One More was born and got implemented. What we do there is we work with communities, building teams. We call them community action teams. Children's advocacy centers, they call them multidisciplinary teams. But we get the police, child protective services, prosecution office. We get a Christian ministry that's already on the ground. And then the mayor typically sits on one of our teams and some executive level politicians. And they come together and they work out protocols and processes, communications, child-friendly interviews, child-friendly processes to deal with the sexual abuse cases. Because a lot of the time a child might come forward in a sexual abuse case, and these agencies aren't speaking to each other. And so the child might get bounced around from place to place and just end up giving up. And so our process allows that child to know exactly where to go for help. And then all of those agencies are working together to make sure that the child gets to safety. And if there's a perpetrator out there, which there obviously is, there's an arrest made, and that the case is compiled well, and that the child gets healing in the aftermath. We've been doing that for 2.5 years, and right now we're active in 3 different districts in Uganda, with a 4th about to come online.
So a district is like
it's like a county,
city, town.
It's like a county. We would call it a county.
Okay.
And so those jurisdictions have between 500,000 and 2.5 million people in a district. So they vary in size, but we work with those community leaders in those different agencies so that everyone in that district is on the same page when a child sexual abuse case comes forward.
Yeah, it's a really cool model because you're taking the leaders that are already in these roles who maybe want to help but don't have the resources to, and might generally work in sort of silos, and you're bringing them together so they can sit and do case reviews. And what it does is essentially streamline the process and enable them to manage a case and resolve it as efficiently as possible and successfully.
Well, so some of these relationships probably were born from your time previously, right? Because you can't just in a span of 2.5 years have grown to where you are. So maybe talk about how some of those relationships that you had from your previous time came into play here, and kind of connecting the dots to, you know, the districts and how you're able to grow versus you having to go back to continue to develop some of those relationships.
The odd thing about when we moved back to the U.S. was kind of feeling like we had made so many relationships, respected, trusted relationships with people on the ground in Uganda, and like what was the purpose behind all of that? We were lost on that for a while, and then when this came up, it all just
came together.
Made sense.
Yeah, that's
it was
so
just
cool.
like a bunch of puzzle pieces were out there on the table,
Right?
And then they all came together, and it was like we went over and met with the people that we know over there, and said, do you think this program would work in Uganda? And they're like, we want to be on board, we want to help. So right out of the gates, we had ministry partners and community leaders on board to get started. And that was putting us leagues ahead of where we would have
That's
been.
amazing.
Yeah.
And how do the children there know about the programs to go for the help that they ultimately need to get?
Yeah, well, so one of the things that our community action teams do is they go out and they do a lot of, we call them sensitizations in Uganda, but essentially they're educational outreaches. They're in the schools, they're talking to the students, they're talking to teachers, they're in the local communities, they're at the markets talking to parents, talking to just regular citizens, talking to children. It's pretty aggressive. We've talked to like 37,000 people face to face in the last 2.5 years. And so word is really spreading. And those children, when they go into the schools, are offered an opportunity to speak with a social worker or a counselor during that outreach. But then they're also told what they should do if they themselves are experiencing abuse or if they know somebody, even the teachers, you know, if you know somebody that you suspect is experiencing this kind of abuse, here's what you should do. Here's who you should call and where you should go. So that's the first step, really.
There's also been quite a number of radio interviews and national television interviews that our daughter Vanessa has done, speaking out on the problem. And we've done some campaigning that way. And right now we're running a campaign on one of the television stations to get some nationwide information out there. So. And
this is an issue that, you know, okay, first of all, it's an issue everywhere in the world. It's an issue right here in the United States. It's not comfortable to talk about. But in Uganda particularly, it's very, there's a lot of stigma and shame around it. So you just don't open your mouth about it. And it's not uncommon from the stories we've heard, if it's happening to you, like our daughter Vanessa, who's very upfront with her story, when it happened to her, her grandmother told her to be quiet. You don't tell people about these things. Her older sister said, just wait, you know, when you start your period, he'll move on to the next child, kind of situation. So we're making noise, like we're breaking the silence, and we're trying to kind of mainstream this conversation to a degree so that people are more comfortable with it and willing to come forth and talk about it.
So just for our audience sake, because is this originated as a culturally acceptable practice beforehand and now it's illegal? Or it's always been sort of illegal and it's happening, people just hush.
It's illegal. So the laws and the policies are in place to protect children. They're just not enforced very well. And then culturally, there's a lot. There are so many different tribes over there that have different customs and traditions. So you can't speak directly to the culture and have that map all the way around Uganda. But for the most part, culturally, children are not supposed to report adults. And if you bring shame on your family, you bring shame on the community. And this is a thing, it's a shame culture. So when you bring something shameful forward, you're shaming everyone. And so that keeps a lot of the children in this problem for a very long time. And a lot of them will not report a case in fear of that shame. And so they'll just suffer through it. And what's starting to happen is when children know, okay, I can go somewhere for help, and the people are going to help me get justice, and I'll be safe, then that releases them to come forward, and we're seeing that more and more in the communities where we're serving.
It almost sounds like it's like a culture shift, because maybe before they reported it, but nobody did anything, or they were shamed, and now they're seeing some positive results come out of it, and maybe sharing it with others that it's okay. Are you seeing that?
Well, we see that. We see that. And then, like, one of the other major cultural issues that we're trying to overcome, and we feel like if we can switch this thinking, there will be a lot of prevention taking place. But one of the problems is a lot of the time, the child is being sexually abused by an uncle who's also providing for the family. And so the child is treated like the criminal in the case, and the perpetrator is the victim. And that's the way it gets seen a lot of the time. And so what we're trying to do is kind of flip the script on that and let the community and the country understand, like, this child is the victim of this crime, and the perpetrators need to be held accountable. And if we can get that kind of settled into the culture, we'll see a lot of prevention come out of communities. And
yeah, it does seem like culturally, the children aren't before. It was protected by law, but in practice, it's not protected by the culture, potentially even within the family. And there has to be a cultural shift to bring about the advocacy for the children, so they're not exposed to that danger.
The biggest way to move the needle, like right now, 1 in 3 girls are sexually abused in Uganda.
Wow.
And so that's a big needle to move. And the best way and the most efficient way to start really seeing that ratio drop is to get prevention out there in the community and shift people's mindset towards the problem. We can capture cases. There's 46 million people in Uganda. Half of those people are under the age of 15, and half of them are girls. So we're talking about millions of cases across the country. We would have to scale up a massive program to make a dent and just rescue millions of children from this situation. Flipping the mindset will move the needle and change that number significantly. So we're working really actively on that as well.
Yeah, I think part of that would be education, and you guys are seeing you guys doing that.
That's right.
And also having laws on the book that's not enforced. It's not very good law, or at least not put it in practice. Do you feel the government, the law enforcement, are they behind you to?
Yeah, like 100% they're behind us. I think that what we've recognized going in is that there are really good laws, and there are police officers who really want to help these kids, and attorneys and social workers and child protective services, but they don't have the resources, just the basic resources, because it is a developing nation. So police officers often don't have cars or vehicles. So how do you do a crime scene investigation if you don't have wheels to get to it? How do you make an arrest and bring a perpetrator back to jail without a car? But if we can, they call us, our social worker goes over, gets the police officer, takes them to the crime scene, takes the child to the police surgeon, who's the doctor that performs the medical exam, takes the police officer to arrest the perpetrator, gets them back in jail. Like, all that can be done so easily. It's just a matter of providing that resource.
Right.
And they're very happy,
I see.
they recognize that this is an issue. We want to help these children. We just don't have the resources. And so we say, great, you're the experts here. We want to help you be able to do that. So let us support you in that.
Okay.
And one other problem there is that there is a lot of corruption in the police department. And this happened to our daughter, Vanessa. Her uncle was arrested, and then the next day, her grandmother bribed him out of jail. And so with a very small amount of money, you can get out of jail. But since we've put these teams together across agencies and they're doing case reviews on a regular basis, that corruption is pretty much eliminated because everybody's watching that one case and knows, okay, is this guy in jail? Where is he in the process? The prosecutors are involved. And so we're really curbing corruption on top of, handling some of the logistic obstacles in the way.
So does your organization actually also serve almost as a watchdog to keep everybody honest?
We have a team member who's an administrator on the community action team, and they're carrying the case files for each one of these children.
Right.
And so every month there's a case review across all of those cases, and everybody's watching. So
You talked about the CAP model. I know it's, theoretically, yes, there is sort of a work process, but if you can kind of lead our audience through, lead us through from the discovery of a crime to the resolution, what does that process look like? How do you even get a case started?
Yeah. So Scott was saying earlier, when we set up a community action team or a CAT team, they established their protocols. So those protocols might involve, like, what does our intake look like? If a child comes to the police or comes to what's called the probation officer there, it's their child protective services person.
Okay.
And they have one in every neighborhood community, and reports a crime, what's the process? And usually pretty immediately in that process is you call a Rescue One More social worker. And that's
You mean the victim?
The police officer or the person that has received the report from the child that the child is reporting to. So they'll immediately call a Rescue One More, the police, right, would immediately call the Rescue One More social worker, who would then come and be with that child, hold that child's hand while she goes through the difficult process of having to make her statement and basically share her story, which can be really traumatizing, right? Every time you have to tell that. So our social workers are very involved with that. They'll accompany her to the medical doctor who does the exam, collects the evidence. They'll talk her through what's going to happen next. They'll make an assessment, working with the Child Protective Services and the police to determine if it's safe for her to return to her home. We hope that it is. A child always needs to be in their home if they can, but sometimes it's just not safe at home. Sometimes the stigmatization that's going on, or the family is not wanting them to come home because they brought shame to the family, or the perpetrator hasn't been caught and had threatened that child's life. Things like that happen. And so in those cases, when it's not safe for them to return, our social worker and the officials they're working with make the decision to place them in one of our safe houses. And there they get a lot of emotional support. We have 4 psychologists or therapists who are certified in play therapy and trauma therapy, and so they work with them for a long time. They provide psychosocial services to their family. They work with the family so they can help them process what happened, understand what's happening in the mind of their child, what their child might be going through, and how they can best support them when they do get back home. They have medical access while they're there. They're discipled. We have a group of mentors in these homes that work with these children and let them know how much they're loved and adored and cherished by their Father in heaven, by the people around them. They do literacy and school. Many of them are in vocational training programs. So if they're a number of girls might come to us, say, pregnant, and going back to school might not be an option for a 17-year-old girl who's pregnant, or a 14-year-old who's pregnant.
She may not have somebody who's able to look after her child. And so we'll provide them with vocational skills and training so that she can eventually make a life for herself and a living wage for her daughter.
So typically, how long are they in this program before they are kind of more independent and can be on their own?
So the goal is always to get them back into a safe and loving home within 6 months. We think that's about how long it takes to stabilize the child. And there's a lot of casework that has to be done if they can't return to their immediate family. And that might mean tracing down a grandmother or an auntie who's willing to take that child back in, and then working with that grandmother and auntie and providing them with the psychosocial services they would need to be able to manage a smooth resettlement for that child. But yeah, we'd love it to be done within 6 months, and sometimes it takes closer to a year.
So all of this is voluntary. I mean, their participation and the family's participation, they have to want the help, right?
Yeah.
And it's, so maybe talk about situations where it may not be so because fear, family, retribution.
Yeah.
How do you overcome that?
Yeah, so there are, I think it's about 17% of the cases of the children that are in our safe shelters. We are just not able to resettle at this point for the reasons you said. Either there is no family that's willing to take them in, or, the shame or the stigma is just, it wouldn't be safe for them to return home. And so that's something we're looking at, like how are we going to handle these situations long term? Because we never want the safe shelter to be long term. That's intended to be temporary. But yeah, right now we're exploring what it looks like to move forward with a more long-term program for that percentage of children who we just simply can't resettle at this point.
It's baffling, some of the situations that we're dealing with. And our social workers are the ones who are really the heroes on that, because they're on the ground dealing with these really traumatic situations every day.
Right.
And, we've taken in girls who are 18 months old. And so,
Very young children.
Very young.
Wow.
And there are so many, the maze of complications is pretty overwhelming. You hear some pretty intense stories that come out of this. So.
Right. I mean, I almost wonder for those social workers that are working with these, how are they filled? Because I imagine this is such a difficult to live this day in and day out hearing these stories.
It's kind of one of our top priorities is to check in with our social workers on a regular basis and make sure that they're getting space. And, counseling is not something that adults in Uganda take on, pretty easily, but they seek help. And then once a year, our goal is once a year to give them a retreat. And so Sarah went over there with a group of ladies this past summer and took all the social workers on a little vacation, retreat, relax, and it was really impactful.
It was so impactful. We took 24 women to a resort for 3 days, and we focused on the topic of Sabbath. And Sabbath rest, and what does that look like, and how do you do it here, but more importantly, how do you take it home? How do you take this concept of Sabbath, which is not a concept that's practiced very well here or in Uganda, but how do you bring that into your daily life, and especially when you're dealing with secondhand trauma, which is real, and
Typically, how big is a cat team for a district? Or just one cat team per district?
Well, they vary in size. So we'll have a core team, and that's typically 5-6 members on that core team, and those are the leaders of the primary agencies.
They do the case reviews. So those would be the people you need involved in a case review, and you want as few people as possible, but the people necessary, right, to get that case solid for court. And then to ensure that child has all the services she needs to experience safety and healing, and justice.
but then, it's kind of open to some of the politicians too. So we have an executive layer over that, and the politicians have really been on board. They take credit for the program.
Sure.
They want to see their legacy lived out, and it's a service that they're providing to the community. So we've had groups where there's like 30 people in the initial meeting, 40 people in the initial meeting, and slowly that starts to whittle down to the core team. But when we launch a new community action team, there's like hundreds of people show up,
really?
and they really celebrate it.
Yeah.
It's something that's relatively big for a government agency to get rolling. So
when we launch it, what we do is we have a signing ceremony, and that's where the CAT team members in public, in front of all the public, sign their commitment to being on this community action team. And so now we have accountability throughout the entire community.
Right.
You are the people who are going to address this if it happens to a child here. So they take their roles real seriously.
Right.
We get a big banner, a huge banner, and have everyone signing. So sometimes those banners are signed by hundreds of people.
Yeah, you get a whole community pledging to
Okay.
protect children.
So the core team kind of watch that and, say, hey, this is my Rolodex of people I can go to enlist to help me.
Yes.
Essentially, it's almost like a volunteer to join in the cause to solve the problem, right?
And it's telling the community, like these people are really coming together and building, a group that is going to tackle this. And once they see the arrests take place and somebody goes to jail and they can't bribe them out, that information gets
out.
communicated around the community fast. Like over in Africa, it's very communal. There's a lot of, we call it lugambo in the local language. It's gossip. But people know everything that's going on. So that's actually like one of the best ways to spread info.
Yes.
So if someone gets arrested and they're not out, everybody knows about it. Second one, third one, fourth one. And I think we have 101.
We have arrested 101 perpetrators so far.
In the last 2
and a half years.
2.5 years.
Yeah, in 3 different communities so far. So
Wow.
that gets out there, and then people start to really take it serious.
Yeah.
And that prevents it from happening as well. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I want to kind of go back 2.5 years. You mentioned Vanessa during the pandemic, she felt called to share her story. Was there something that kind of triggered her that says, I want to make a difference, I want to share my story? What was it that was in her?
She was at home doing school online and was on some sort of online Facebook group. Or Instagram or whatever. They were talking about different things, and she shared her story in that group. And when that group closed down, a lot of people started texting her and saying, "This happened to me. I didn't know what to do." Even young men were texting her saying, "This also happened to me," and that's what really kind of brought it out of her. She was like, "I shared this painful story,
right?
But then other people
She's
had
not
gone
alone.
through. I wasn't alone in it, and
they weren't alone,
and she can make a difference."
Yes.
So our guiding scripture is Genesis 50:20. Don't be afraid, because what man intended for evil, God intended for good, the saving of many lives, which is being done right now. So we really saw this as an opportunity, and Vanessa saw this as an opportunity to take a very horrible and messy and awful, like the most tragic thing you can think of happening to a person, and using it somehow, turning it around in her resilience to make something good out of it.
Right. So brave of her to even share her story over and over, because I imagine she's having to relive that. But it's almost a kind of a selfless love that she feels she needs to make this difference. Right. So how is she doing now? She's 23.
She's 23.
She's in college.
She's in college and she's working.
Oh.
She's spent a lot of time in Africa since this started. And last year, she went back for the first time since Rescue One More started last summer.
Okay.
And she was invited to be on national television shows,
Okay.
speak in conferences, speak at churches and
Good for her.
schools, and it really kind of filled her up.
Yeah.
We had rescued a pretty good number of girls at that point, and so she got to spend time with the girls who had been rescued.
Okay.
Because she was
Right.
courageous enough to tell her story, and she said that was, of all the things that she did, being on like national shows and all of that, she said the most impactful thing that she did was see her girls.
Right.
She calls them her girls.
Right.
And we opened up a safe house in November of last year, and she was there for the dedication and couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
All of the things that have been born out of this story that are really helping a pretty good number of girls, and we're just continuing to grow it, and God's opening doors, and she's there just kind of serving as a spokesperson and an inspiration for the other girls, and maybe when she finishes school she'll want to take on a bigger role, but for now she's our spokesperson and inspires these other children.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, that, when Vanessa first, it's very rare, like we said, for a child to go to the police and report this kind of thing, but Vanessa was that child, that 1 in a million who did. She went to the police, and when she went, they didn't have a program in place for kids who were going through this, and she couldn't return home because she had just brought shame on her family, and they had said, don't come home. And so the safest place for her at that time was a jail cell, and she spent 2 weeks in jail, which is why she knows her uncle she saw him get knocked out by her grandmother, and then her grandmother told her there, don't come home, you're never welcome here again.
So wasn't it one of those times that you were connected with her?
Well, actually, when she came into our lives, we were visiting with the social worker in his office. He was helping us with the adoption of our 2 other children. And that particular day, we went in, we were trying to get him to fill out some forms, and he said, look, I can't help you today because I don't even know what I'm going to do with this child. The police brought her to me this morning. She's been sleeping in jail for the last 2 weeks. She was abused by her family members, and I don't know where she's going to sleep tonight. And so we were like, oh, that's awful. Like, she can sleep with us, she can sleep with us until you find her family. And 5 years later, she'd been with us, and we were in love, and we just ended up adopting her, and she became a part of our forever family. But when she was at the safe house and got to see the dedication and the opening of that safe house, she says that moment was just really impactful and overwhelming almost, because she saw now when other children come forward, they don't have to sleep in a jail cell.
Right.
There's a safe place for them to
they
go.
Have hope.
Yes. Yeah. So.
Yeah, jail's the wrong place.
Wrong place.
The wrong place after you report a crime. You go to jail.
Ugandan jail is next level too. So it's not appropriate.
Yeah. So what's next for Rescue One More? Just there's plan to expand to other districts, or kind of broaden the scope to maybe even other countries in Africa. Is this a serious issue in the entire continent of Africa, in other countries as well?
It's a serious issue everywhere. Africa, the big problem is there are not resources, in a lot of the countries there. But our focus right now is to build community action teams in every district in Uganda, and there are 135 districts there. Right now, by this time next year, we'll be in 5 or 6 districts, and so what's next is district after district after district, and we're concentrating mostly on the capital city and the surrounding area as a major center of influence and density of population. And
this year, this coming year, that'll be our focus.
But then we'll hit the major cities out on the outskirts of town as well. So we have a couple of big challenges to overcome in the next year as well.
Okay.
What we're going to do with the children who can't be resettled, what kind of shelter and refuge can we provide for them, and then on the prevention front, we have a pretty exciting development that the president of Uganda's daughter has joined our team, and she's real passionate about child sexual abuse and trafficking, and so we're going to put a plan together with her to really make an impact on the cultural side of things, the awareness and the education side of things. Her mother, who's the first lady, is the Minister of Education and has line of sight to every school in Uganda. Perfect. So we can really make a broad impact on prevention and just keep going one child, rescuing one more,
one child, one district at a time.
One district, one child at a time, and really trying to bring an end to the problem. If we can really make an impact in Uganda, our hope is that any other country, African or South American, that doesn't have resources and doesn't have a program in place, they can look at what's been done in Uganda, and we'd be happy to help implement in other countries as well.
So how do you resource your program to build the? I mean, resources have to come from somewhere, right?
We're out there, getting fundraising.
We're hustling.
Getting donations, putting on events, speaking on Hello World podcasts, and really trying to get the word out there to gain support. So, the finances behind it, the government in Uganda doesn't have money, so we're supplementing a lot of the things that the government would normally, in the United States provide. We're trying to provide those things to overcome some of the obstacles. So, we're gaining funding from individuals and churches and some corporate sponsors as well.
So maybe we can use this opportunity. What is your next event?
Well, we just had one last Thursday.
Oh.
And that's our annual fundraiser that we do out in Dripping Springs.
The gala.
That'll be coming back around next November.
Okay.
And then we do smaller things outside of that. But
we're kicking off our year-end fundraising campaign now, because this is the time when people start to give. The entire year, we have the opportunity to gain more donations in the next month and a half than any other time of year. So we're going to be very aggressively fundraising. And
so if you have to leave with our audience some important points on why this ministry is important, what would be some of the main takeaway that you wanted to really grasp from this episode?
Well, I think, the ministry is so important because you're dealing with one of the most evil things that exists in our society. And it's so dark, and it's so tragic for a child to have to go through this. And the healing process takes a lifetime. When a child's violated like this, it's just so hard to overcome. If healing doesn't take place, and there isn't proper counseling, and there isn't proper intervention, children will go into drugs, alcohol, promiscuity, and there's a very high suicide rate that comes out of this. It's just shattering, and we can help. We can help these little kids that don't have anyone else to help them. So from an impact standpoint, you can't think of too many things that you'd want to see eliminated from our society, our global society. And then I think, we're a young organization and growing quickly. And so if people want to get on board, we're easy to contact. We're very accessible. And it's not a behemoth organization. Almost everything is on the ground in Uganda. And so if people want to partner with us financially, that goes so far. We just had our annual fundraising dinner and talked to the people who had given last year about what we've done in the past year, and they can't believe how much is being done with the small amount of money that we have right now. So if people want to partner financially, they can go to rescueonemore.com and get involved. They can sign up for our newsletter, and that will give them more information about what's going on every month. And then social media, you can follow us there. And then people, if they can pray. Pray for
Very
our
important.
teams on the ground,
The children.
the prayers. People really feel the prayers.
This is a spiritual battle,
Yeah.
for sure. We need all the prayer support we can get.
Yeah. When we first started this podcast, Hello World, our mission was to find all the good that's all around us, rediscover, right? And my sister, she always got, well, are we going to be one of those feel good only and ignore other things that may be happening? But your story is also good because people are working good on behalf of children to confront evil. And it doesn't always make you, it's not a happy situation, but it is a necessary situation, for the good of the children. And, I want to thank you for what you guys are doing. And it's a tough job. And in some way, you're creating something out of very little, next to nothing. And in a whole different country that present its own challenges. Just pray for the ministry. And, I know we're both supporting of what you guys are doing. And we know you guys, your heart. It's more than just a ministry because we know you have a good heart to want to pursue for the good of others, especially your heart for children. So, but today we're confronting a very serious situation, and children need our help.
Yeah.
And this is very important to get across.
And there is hope out there. We have over 153 kids that we've served, and we've rescued 88
from dangerous situations.
Sarah gets the numbers every day.
Awesome.
And she knows them every day. She knows every case.
Yeah.
But we even last August, I was at our emergency shelter, where we do assessments, and there were 4 new children that had just come in, and 14 other girls that were there. The 14 girls who had spent more than a week there, they were laughing and playing and dancing and having a great time. And the 4 new ones looked like there was no hope. But in a very short amount of time, the counselors and the therapists, they can lead those children from that dismal outlook, that very dark outlook, into that better headspace, that spiritual place. And so there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of hope there too, because if those kids were just left at home suffering from this problem and never get a chance to get out of it, that's the way their life is going to be.
You're helping to change the trajectory of their life.
It's really changing and transforming the kids that have to go through this and giving them a vision and a joy back into their life. And so,
taking them out of darkness over to hope and helping them see that, even though it may be a long road ahead, but kind of giving them that hope for wanting to keep staying on it. Thank you, Scott and Sarah. This was really such an amazing time together to learn about Rescue One More, learn a little bit more about the two of you, and sharing about Vanessa, who really I think is a heroine in all of this, that started Rescue One More, or it instigated this Rescue One More mission 2.5 years ago to where we are today. So thank you both for your time.
And thank you both for having us on the podcast, getting the word out, and then all the support and encouragement that you've
Absolutely.
given to the mission.
Very glad to be
Absolutely.
involved. Well, thank you so much.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. We have a lot of fun putting the episodes together, trying to bring you quality guests and good content so that we can inspire each of us to be our best version of ourselves. It would mean so much to us if you would subscribe to our channel and like our videos. Hope to see you next time.